Hello and welcome to the latest Game and Gadget podcast with me, James Woodcock from pixelrefresh.com, and of course with me, the co-founder of Revolution Software, Tony Warriner. How are you, Tony?
All right, James. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad.
So, I believe you've been having some fun with a BBC Micro. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So I've had this BBC Micro Model B for ages and ages. I think I bought it on eBay like 15 years ago or something, maybe more, 20 years ago. I don't know, because we had them at school. I never actually owned one. Anyway, I bought one a long time ago, and it went with all the rest of them, sat in the attic and moved around and stuff. But anyway, it moved. All my stuff is together now, as we know, and so I thought I'd give it a go. Because I suddenly thought I wanted to play Elite in its original place. The true place to play Elite is on the BBC Micro, of course. Having played it on the 64, I think originally in the 80s, more than anything. Then the Amstrad, I think a bit of both. 64, we've spent months playing it. Anyway, I thought, blooming heck, I've got a BBC Micro, so I'll dig it out and give it a go. And Jonah of Pixel Addict magazine was chatting to him about it. He's going to build me a GoTech for it, which should be where the game will sit on a nice place that's not a cassette or a 5 1/4 inch disc, which I don't have anyway. So he said to me, Jonah said to me, what will probably happen is with this BBC Micro, you'll plug it in and the power supply caps will just blow and it'll start smoking, horrible smelling smoke. And I thought, nah, it'd be all right. I'm sure when I bought it, I switched it on, it was fine, and I'm sure it'll be all right now. Anyway, I got it out and plugged it all in and stuff. And I had to buy a SCART lead for it to plug into the lovely OSSC, because that solved that problem.
Another SCART lead, yeah.
That was that problem solved. So I just needed a new lead for that, and I thought I'd be away. Anyway, I plugged it in, switched it on, and up it came like the ready thing, and cursor flashing and fantastic. And then there was a kind of strange sound and a crackling sound, and then just as Jonas said, a ton of white smoke started billowing out the back of it, and I thought it was set on fire or something. So I kind of unplugged it and hightailed it out of the house, carrying this BBC Micro with smoke coming out of it. And blimey, what a smell! It's horrible stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the rest of the machine will be fine, so it should be. So I found on eBay a recapped power supply for a BBC Micro. So I bought it, and I should get it this week, and maybe this weekend I'll have another crack at that one.
Fantastic. Yeah, that is certainly a risk with older computers. So when you first got it then, did you actually use it at all, or did it literally go straight into storage?
No, I never used it. I switched it on to see if it worked. And then I thought, it's one of those things you go, well, I'll get around to playing with that. And I did get around to playing with it just 20 years later.
And with a little bit of smoke involved as well.
Yeah, it's a bit unpleasant, to say the least.
Well, this is what happens when you release a game called Broken Sword 2, The Smoking Mirror. But
Smoking Micro.
Yeah, the smoking Micro, perfect. So, on the same sort of vein, with fun with capacitors, original Xboxes. So the original Xbox was literally the first console I purchased at launch. It was the one I was so excited about. And of all things, it was because it had Dolby Digital 5.1 out of the box for gaming, not just the movie playback. For actual game, you would hear things from old 5.1 speakers.
I didn't know that. Interesting,
yeah. So that was the first one to do it properly with gameplay in terms of the console space. But then there was always the hint that later there'd be online functionality with the built-in Ethernet. And then later came Xbox Live, and that was pretty wonderful to say the least, and is still going strong today. But I also brought a second Xbox later on as well, probably a couple of years later after the first. And that's the one, ironically, I opened up to check it was all okay. And it wasn't okay. So there are a lot of sort of warnings on the internet, and rightly so, ladies and gentlemen, that if you have an original Xbox, no matter if it was a launch model or any of the iterations that came later in its lifetime, there is one capacitor out of all of them which are almost guaranteed to fail in some spectacular leaky fashion. And unfortunately, it's the clock capacitor. So the thing that stores the date and time also has a habit of spilling its guts all over the motherboard, and if left unchecked can actually destroy part of your beloved Xbox motherboard and chips and capacitors that happen to be close by. And
So
when I open mine,
as you know, James, I've got an Xbox One, never used, never switched on.
remind me next time I see you. We definitely need to open that up and see what's going on inside. I haven't even dared open my launch one yet. That's certainly the endeavour probably for this weekend. But even in this later revision, it was terrible. So it covered probably a third of the motherboard of
really?
where that was situated. And, you know, there's fans inside the Xbox, so it's sucking air in and blowing it out sort of thing. Or one of those options. And so there was dust all over where it leaked as well. So it'd probably been working perfectly, and I hadn't even realised about this problem. Dust had been sitting on the guts, it had spilled everywhere. So it was like a very furry motherboard I had to then carefully clean. Ironically, the Xbox was working fine. It was only after I cleaned it did it then start showing other symptoms of problems. And in the end, I had to completely remove the clock capacitor because that was certainly no good. Now, I think for most revisions of the Xbox, except for the latest one, if I'm correct, you can do that and it's absolutely fine. It just won't remember the date and time. Whoop-de-doo. But also, there's 3 capacitors close to where the CPU is, which are also quite prevalent of causing problems. If they're not leaking, then they're just bad. And I ended up replacing most of certainly the bigger capacitors with help from a friend because they're an absolute swine to remove. Basically, the motherboard, or main board if you prefer, has a lot of sort of copper on it. So as you're putting your soldering iron in to try and remove the capacitor, the heat just sucks straight into the board. It's set for where you actually want to target the thing. So that was a bit of a mission. But I did look online again to see if it was just me, and it wasn't. There's a lot of people having problems removing capacitors off original Xboxes. So in the end, I probably replaced with a friend about 10 capacitors. I could have gone and done them all. I had the capacitors, but it was fiddly work. But now it's working absolutely fine. It's all cleaned up. Great. But now I've got a second Xbox, the launch Xbox, where I've got to open up and see what's going on in there. But I wanted to play the original Xbox because Xbox Live, although that was killed on the original Xbox a number of years ago now, there's a service that the community have set up called Insignia, where a lot of the original games that had online functionality you can play again. So playing titles like Midtime Madness 3, which I absolutely loved back in the day, I want to get online with my friends and play a bit of Midtime Madness 3 because a lot of those have also kept their original Xboxes. I haven't told them about leaking capacitors yet. I'm saving that conversation for a little later. But certainly, this is a direct warning. Anyone who's got an original Xbox, please just check that clock capacitor. If it hasn't yet, it will do. It's a good idea just to get that removed.
So do they come apart quite easy, do
they? You need a T20 bit to open the Xbox, which if you've got one of those universal kits or an iFixit kit, you've probably got that as part of the selection. And then when you get great, and then when you get inside, then you use T10s to remove the DVD drive and the hard drive to get to the actual motherboard.
Sounds so
do you know, actually, although the components are quite big to remove, they're not too bad. Taking the main board out, there's a lot of cables to unplug from it, but I've seen far worse. So generally, it's not too bad to work on as long as you've just got that T20 and T10 bit to unscrew the things, and then you're good to go. But yeah, that clock capacitor, get rid of it. And if you're not good at soldering or you don't want to go down that line, I have seen some recommendations where you could just snip away the clock capacitor rather than trying to desolder it off the board. Some people have even recommended trying to just twist it until it comes off. I probably wouldn't recommend that bit. That sounds a bit too dangerous to me.
Yeah. And it works without anything across the connection.
Yes. For most revisions, I think it's just the last one, 1.6, where you need something in its place. So there you go, folks. So please, if you have one sitting or in use, check, because you might have a nasty surprise awaiting you. And it's worth getting sorted out because it nearly destroyed mine. And that wasn't the launch one, that was the later one, as I say. So that was my Xbox exploits, but that's now working with a bit of faff. But looking forward to playing some original Xbox titles again, and I will be plugging that, of course, into my CRT TV, or if I choose, the OSSC. And the beauty of SCART.
The beauty of OSSC,
yeah, exactly that.
Fine
exactly
things.
That. So yeah, capacitors have been fun of late. Recently, I went to the Zap Live event, which was lots of Commodores, as you would imagine. So Zap Live was a magazine back in the day, all about the Commodore. And as coincidence would have it, it was before the event, probably about a few weeks before that, I'd already cleaned a Commodore 64 I got off eBay quite a couple of years ago, I think. And it came in an absolute state to the point where there are insects as in the grill. And even though I wasn't risking turning it on just yet, I knew I had to clean it. I didn't even want it in the house in the state it was in. It was really bad. It's like almost like I wanted to fumigate the room after I'd opened the box and saw the state of it.
I have one actually, but it's. I'm not going to plug it on. It is a mess like yours. It looks rough, and I don't want to switch it on with the really ropey original power supply. So I guess buy a new power supply somehow and then see what happens. What are the caps like on those things?
The capacitors, I don't think are bad at all. Sometimes chips seem to fail. But the thing that seems to be the destroyer of Commodore 64s, so the original Xbox, it's that clock capacitor. For Commodore 64s, it's the original power supply. It seems to be that it stops properly regulating the power that gets shunted through to the Commodore 64. So rather than limiting it, it just goes, have as much as you want, take it all, take more. And then that can fry components. So definitely, if you don't trust the original, I have got a modern replacement, which actually cost me more than the Commodore 64 itself. But that's usually how these things work, isn't it? So yeah, we can certainly try yours, Tony, but let me bring around my modern alternative, and that's going to be much, much safer. But actually, the only thing it needed fixed on the Commodore 64 other than replacing the power supply was there's actually a proper fuse. You know, like you'd get in a plug and you'd change the fuse back in the day. There's actually like a fuse inside the Commodore 64. And I could see instantly it had blown because the little wire, if it's not there or it's split in two, then it's not making the connection.
That presumably protects it from the broken power supply, though.
To a point, probably. To a point. So I've replaced the fuse and then it's working absolutely beautiful. So just before the Commodore style event, my Commodore was fixed. I was playing loads of my original tapes, which quite a few I'd still got that I hadn't chucked away, thank goodness. And they're working fine. Also had an original cartridge with multiple games on it. And, what's the one I play a lot? Mine's gone blank. Flimbo's Crest. A lot of fun. Music's great on it. And because it's cartridge, it loads instantly, which is even better, particularly when you then go back to cassette. You have to wait for the loading times. Probably 2 minutes for the music to start, another minute for the graphic to appear, and then another 5 minutes to load the game. And it does make me wonder, if you didn't have the title graphic and the music, would it have actually loaded a lot quicker? Who knows? You probably know better than I, as someone who's done Obsidian and loading screens.
Well, it would, but you had to have a loading screen. It was pretty mandatory.
And if you didn't have a loading screen, and this is the thing I always found fascinating, particularly with the Commodore 64, it was almost hypnotic, the loading screens, as in the borders. Once the loading screen would appear, you'd have your picture of the game in the middle, and then the borders would be flashing to show, I guess, just to say, hey, the game is loading.
Well,
But
no,
it'd be this trance visual dance.
it's the bits. It'll be like it'll be two colors, and when when the bits are ones, it'll be one color, and when the bits are zeros, it'll be another color, and that's what you get the pattern from.
Ah, I did not know that.
It's there for a reason. It's not there for a reason, but it's linked to something logical. Put it that way. But the 64, people were able to write their own loaders, so there were faster ones in the end. There's one called Pavloader, which was like really clever because if it failed, if it went, if it stopped loading off the cassette, you could just rewind it a little tiny bit, and it would pick up where it was and have another go. You didn't have to go back to the start or anything. It really got quite sophisticated in the end on the 64.
I think there was another one called Fast Load, and somewhere you could. It seems that the Commodore also, the big floppy disk drive, when it was actually floppies, was quite limited in speed. There was some problem there where a cartridge could also make that a bit faster as well.
1541, I think, is the number.
That's the one, 1541. Never was lucky enough to have the floppy disk one, but I think that wasn't much of a European thing. I think that's probably more abroad. In America, they would have had that. I think in the UK, we were dominated with the cassette.
Yeah, not many people. I mean, if you were writing software for it, you would buy one, but otherwise, you didn't really need to bother.
Indeed, and certainly the magazine cover tapes, and that's what they were. They were always tapes. I never saw a disc one until later on when the machines demanded it has to be a disc.
It'd be nice to have one, actually. I imagine they're not so expensive.
It's weird to put them because they're not small. They're nearly as big as the C64 by the looks of it.
Where to put anything?
Well, yeah, that is. I'm literally sat in one room full of retro stuff, and I'm literally sitting with an Amiga A500 one side, another A500 in a bit of a poor state the other side, my Amstrad CPC 464. It's getting a bit mental. I need to get a bit more organised, but this room is only so big, and I don't want to dominate the house with my retro stuff because I have a family to look after, and it's not fair on them.
Yeah, you can't leak outside.
Well, retro can't leak outside the room like the capacitors leak on motherboards, that's for sure. But
it's about as welcome in my experience.
But one of the things I did get, which was quite nice for the Commodore 64, there's quite a number of ways you can load games into it. So obviously it's the original ways where you connect your cassette deck, which mine came with but needed some repair, which I fixed. Not a problem. Just belt repairs, maintenance and that sort of thing. And again, a very good clean. Cartridge was never lucky enough to have discs, so that was not really a thing. But then there are, like you were saying, like GoTech drives. There are similar things for the Commodore 64. And those come in all sorts of forms and sizes. And quite a few different expense levels as well, I have to say. I went, as a starter, with one of the cheaper options, something called Tapecart SD. And basically it would plug where your cassette deck would normally be plugged into. You have a micro SD card, you load your games in there, including a file that's called browser. And then you load as if it was a cassette deck. And then it literally loads a browser of all the files. And then you can select which game you want to play. And 2,000 games to start with, I think is pretty good going. And certainly not everyone is compatible because it's this particular format it has to be in a particular size. But even so, I found most of them. And the ones I haven't, I've still got some of the tapes, so that's been quite fun. But the loading is almost instantaneous. So even though it's like a tape format, within 5 seconds you're playing the game.
It's a good thing to do, isn't it? I mean, it works so well. I've got one on my Amstrad CPC now, and it's just really good. Really good.
It is a life changer. having it load instantly like that, because often you just want to see, oh, this looks or sounds interesting. Let's go and have a look. Do you really want to wait 5 to 10 minutes to see if the game is actually appealing in any way, or do you just want to find it in 5 seconds?
There was something good about loading off cassette. I mean, you could get yourself ready. You could go get a cup of tea. You could, all sorts of things.
Spoken like
right.
a true Englishman.
Yeah, it was not so bad.
Well, the funny thing is, I miss some of the loading screens and the music. So there was a game called Stormlord, and what I remember most about that is actually less about the game. It was more the music as it was loading and the title screen the loading screen, I should say, while you're waiting for it to load. That was the bit that was always etched to my memory. And of course, the Commodore 64 and its SID chip was fantastic for music. Well beyond its time in that sense.
Did you buy the Rob Hubbard book at Zap?
I didn't, but I'm a big fan of Rob Hubbard. So if we can get him on the Game and Gadget podcast, that will certainly be something I'll be looking to try and do. I've got other books to finish at the minute, including one I brought at another event not that long ago. So once I finish those books, then I will definitely look into getting another book. But I did buy a Blu-ray of the Commodore story, I think it was called.
Okay.
And that was good to watch. Lots of interviews with people who are involved. And some people have now sadly passed away, and that's the risk, trying to save these memories for later generations and actually interview the people who experienced it, rather than it being an anecdote from someone who's told a son, who's told a cousin, whose neighbour's cat suddenly purred at the right time.
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote a book, you see.
You did.
Because you never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Well, without that particular bleak view, have you got any copies of your book left in terms of the physical ones, or are they all gone now?
I think I have 8 copies in a box. Wow. I mean, they're not for sale, but I'm down to about 8, I think.
Well done. Because I remember we having conversations about this ages ago, and you can never be sure how well these things are going to go, but that's fantastic. Really well done. So still the digital ones available, is that right?
Oh, yeah. But I never sell them. No one buys it. It's I mean, I thought they would. I thought I would keep selling it, but no. And that actually is why I'm slightly nervous of printing another 1,000 physical copies, because maybe everyone who wants to buy it has bought it, or everyone that I've got reach to, on the socials. Maybe my reach has reached its capacity and reached its reach, yeah, and I can't really sell anymore. So I mean, I'd like to, if I ever have lots of space somewhere and a good few £1,000 doing nothing, then I just print a load anyway. But as it stands, it's a bit of a risk, I think. It'd be nice to have more, because maybe very occasionally people say, can you have a copy? I mean, Charles, the last one, Charles Cecil came to me and said, can I have a copy of the book? Send it to someone who wants to read it. And I was like, someone who's in it, actually.
Sonia spoke nicely of, I hope.
Actually, I did, yeah.
Oh, God.
Thankfully, yeah. Because it's not guaranteed, is it? But so yeah, I mean, I had to crack the box open and pull another one out. But so it's they do, and people sometimes write to me and say, "Can I buy the real one?" And they're a bit put out when I say it's only the PDF, But what to do? It's a bit of a conundrum. Maybe in future, maybe one day.
The Kickstarter.
Yeah, well, if there's another book, I mean, I want to write some more books, and if I wrote another book sometime, then off the back of it, like if there was some other Kickstarter comes along, then potentially that book could be an add-on for another Kickstarter. It's like, how do you sell these things? How do you reach people? That's the big question. I mean, I'm sure that in a planet for like world population is 7 billion people, there must be another 1,000 people that would actually enjoy reading my book. But who are they? That's the question.
Well, I'm at least one, so you just need to find the other 999.
Sure, you must have a copy, don't you?
I do have a copy. I do indeed.
You're not going to buy another one.
Well, I'll buy part 2.
Oh, well, part 2, yeah.
And so the Commodore 64, fantastic, and brought back a lot of memories, particularly from my childhood, because the first one I actually got was actually, I guess the Americans would call it, from like a yard sale. So me and my dad were walking the dog, and around the estate there was literally, like, you'd get a pace table with various bric-a-brac on, a bit like a car boot. And for those who don't know what a car boot is, it's where you'd all go in a field, you have your cars, you open the boot sometimes, you have probably a table in front of it, and that's where you'd put what you're going to sell. And it's just for lots of people just to go and sell the stuff that they need to get rid of, essentially, make a little bit of money as well. Old clothes, old electronics, whatever it may be. But this was more like a small yard sale. And on it, as a youngster, I happened to spot there was a Commodore 64C, which is exactly like the one I've got behind me now. We didn't have enough money for it. So my dad said, why don't you exchange it for one of your railway locomotives? And I had a double O gauge, and I had a Thomas the Tank Engine set as part of it. So I exchanged one of those and a couple of carriages, I can't remember, or something like that. And I got myself this Commodore 64. And I did not know anything about the Commodore 64 at the time, but it was a great decision. It didn't come with a tape deck. It was literally the Commodore 64, the cartridge, the multi-cart game cartridge I was talking about a moment ago with Flimbo's Crest on and a few others, and a controller which wasn't actually meant for the Commodore 64. Ironically, it was off an Amstrad, probably something like the GX console, which they released as a mechanism to try and make some more inroads into various markets, as Amstrad would. But I loved it. And then I was downsizing, got rid of it, and regretted it years to come, and then ended up buying it all over again with lots of insects inside to boot. So it's been another one of those retro journeys. But it hasn't stopped there, because a long time ago, I got a Sony PSP. And that has been a lovely device. And more recently, I've changed the display on it, which is much nicer. And it was only £12 for the replacement screen. A bit of a faff to put in, because there's one very, very small solder joint you need to bridge. And then, it was a bit of a nightmare. But it was not too bad in the end. But it's so much better just for £12. But then, of course, the dream. The last proper Sony handheld console. Not this silly thing they've released recently where it's more streaming what's off your PS5 to the screen. A proper standalone unit. The PS Vita. And I got one of those.
You can play Broken Sword 5.
I can. It's downloaded. I haven't actually tried it on here yet. But I have got Broken Sword 5 to try just to see what it's like on the PS Vita, because I've already purchased it on the PC. I've already purchased it on the Xbox. I've already purchased it on Android. So why not try it on the PS Vita? But, it's a nice form factor again for something like that. And I didn't realise there's two models of PS Vita. There's the first generation and the second generation. The key difference, other than the fact that the second one's slightly slimmer, the second one doesn't have an OLED display. And the first one, being OLED, obviously, it's beautiful. Even though this thing's probably about 12 years old, the OLED display is really good. Really good. I can't imagine not having an OLED display on this.
So they downgraded it.
They downgraded it, I guess, to save a bit of money.
That's a bit of a confidence vote in their own stuff, isn't it?
Well, it's funny you should say that. So when they launched it, it sold very well at first and then very quickly tailed off. So I think it was their last-ditch attempt to bring life to the PS Vita and keep the price within reins, but in the end, it was a bit of a flop, which is a shame, because hardware-wise, particularly the first one, which I've got, it's great. I love it. And the analog sticks, there's two of them. And anyone who's played on the Dreamcast will think, oh, if only there was a second analog stick from when I'm playing first-person shooter games, of which the Dreamcast did have them. Unreal Tournament and Quake 3. So they actually made sure you could use a mouse and keyboard in the end for those games. So using a controller was hard work. But on the PS Vita, 2 analog sticks, PSP only had 1 as well. It's really beautiful for first-person shooters. So it's another genre of games that actually works really well. And it's such a small form factor. Sorry, Steam Deck. It's a beautiful thing, the Steam Deck, but it is quite a whopping size of a thing. Where this is, dare I say, pocketable? Probably pushing it a bit much. Depends how big your pockets are, folks. But it is very, very nice, and it is a shame it didn't succeed and has seemingly put off Sony forever now, going back into the portable space. It seems it's Nintendo's realm.
Yeah, well, the trick is not to try too hard with the spec, I think.
That's one thing Nintendo's been far more reserved on, is they've always been, what can we do? It's innovative, that's the word I'm trying to say, innovative in terms of gameplay, and that the graphics supplement that. Whereas the Vita's definitely a big push on what you can do on the display, given its OLED. The fact it could push, even for the time, a lot of polygons on screen. I mean, it's shockingly impressive. Even now, I'm playing Wipeout, which was a launch title. Looks amazing. I can't believe it.
Yeah, but is that the right thing? I don't know. I mean, my view is the dual screen is the DS is the height of all these things, because it was still a cheap thing to make, and it was not overspec'd in any way, but there was a lot of innovation. Just having two screens. I mean, at first it was like, I remember everyone was going, "What's this for? Why two screens?" But as soon as you play a game that's actually been well thought through for it, it's actually really good. I mean, what we did with Broken Sword was really good. I think it just made sense. You put things up there like secondary to the game. It works. It was a great device. Great device. I don't know why they stopped making them.
So I absolutely agree, because I think the main problem with things like the Vita is, if you want these flagship titles, you'd buy them on the console. You'd want them on the big display. The Steam Deck's going to blow out all this theory and philosophy, but let's stick with it for now.
it kind of does. The Steam Deck's, it's a bit of an enigma, isn't it? It's like, it is really great, and it breaks every rule we will say about all the other ones. But there's something just great about the Steam Deck. I like it a lot, but I think it's because I think because it's big. You think of it more in terms of a PC. It's like a portable PC rather than a specific portable gaming device. It's not like a DS in that it's a quirky little thing in its own right. It's just a different form factor PC, isn't it? A Steam Deck, I guess, and as such, it's pretty convenient.
Indeed. Let me stick with my original philosophy for a minute, because I've just thought of the big caveat here. That's the big difference. So why would you pay £40-50 for a PS Vita game when you can buy the console game and just sit on a couch and play with all the bigger screen and etc., etc.?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. See, the software would have been expensive to make for it, because it's not any easier than a full size console. So the money gets sunk into all them polygons. So the games are expensive, and the thing shoots itself in the foot.
Exactly. But the Nintendo, like you say, with the dual screen, it offered something different that was unique to that handheld. And even the Nintendo 3DS, which I love as a handheld, it was 3D on the move. And not everybody had 3D TVs. And 3D TVs, you needed the glasses. The 3DS, you didn't actually need to wear any glasses. It just worked because they had the reliance. It was close proximity. It was for one person. TVs did not have that advantage. But I think where the Steam Deck works well is you've already got your Steam library. So all those games come with you. So if your Steam Deck is powerful enough to play it and it runs on Linux, then you can play that game on the move. And that's a big selling point. So you haven't got to rebuy everything. It's there ready to go.
It's more of a laptop for playing Steam games on.
Maybe so. Maybe so. But yeah, still, it's a shame. The PS Vita is a beautiful thing, and there's plenty of good games on it. But yeah, it wasn't to be, and obviously killed Sony's enthusiasm.
Yeah, I don't actually have one. I've got a PSP, I think, somewhere, but I don't have a Vita.
We'll show you mine, and we can reminisce and try Broken Sword 5 on the Vita.
Yeah, I mean, we had them in the office for that, of course, but I never had one.
So thinking back to the Broken Sword days, how did you really make most of the dual screen? Was it inventory and things like that would appear there in the hints?
Yeah, the inventory and the map and the conversations, of course, the speech, the portraits. They would sit very nicely at the top. So if people were talking, then you'd keep the whole of the normal background location on the bottom screen, and then the portraits would go up the top, and the text would be at the top. So you'd get both. It was really good. Then the inventory, then the map, and then when there was nothing happening, there would be just a graphic of the location you're in, like Paris or wherever. It was great. It worked really well. I mean, you think you'd be doing crappy things to try and make use of it, and actually, when you make a game, at least for us, it was actually very easy, to think of what to do with it. It wasn't like going around in circles trying to force things into that space that we had to utilize. It was actually very easy and logical, and the game broke up quite nicely into what would go top and what would go bottom. I was a huge fan. Yeah, huge fan.
No, I think I've tried it on the DS, but it was quite a while ago now.
Director's cut, wasn't it, that we did?
Yeah.
That for, yeah. Ubisoft.
Indeed it was.
Yeah, it was a good thing, and they're expensive now because people want them. So there's like a big one, isn't there? There's like there's like a DS. What's it called? XL. That's it. They're like £100 odd.
They can be. I got a DSi XL, so it was like a camera built into that one. I managed to get a DSi XL, which I think it's like £20 or something. But again, that was I think they'd spilt sugar in it or something. So I had to open it all up and empty the sugar out. But yeah, the screens are absolutely fine, and the shell's got a few knocks on it. But my mum can play some of those Professor Layton mysteries.
Layton was good, yeah.
So she's been having a ball with those. And what was it? Oh, the memory games. I can't remember the name of the memory games. I don't play them, obviously. Can you tell? But
they were like really big for a bit, weren't they?
Yeah. Mind. I can't remember.
It's on the.
There's definitely an irony here.
There's an irony, isn't there? We can't remember what it's called.
Well, we don't play the game.
Brain Trainer or something like that.
Brain Training. There you go. Well done. That's it, yeah.
Bloody hell.
Go get your stylus out, Tony. Well done. But, so you'd hold your DS in a different angle, so you'd see the screens at a different view, which was quite novel. So you open it more like a book. You had a screen left and right rather than top and bottom. And there's some nice little games, and find out what your brain age is, which was the whole point. You'd run some tests, and it'd tell you how old you are based on your memory and your skills, etc.
I don't think I want to know that, actually. But.
Yeah, my mum got a shot, bless her. So she's been playing it now to improve the situation. But there are some cheap ones about. You just have to keep your eyes open, really. There's obviously stores that sell retro consoles and handhelds and games and accessories, but particularly the high street ones tend to be quite expensive, but then they're offering warranties and things, which a private seller isn't going to do.
I'd be eBay, I suppose. Can you get a clear shell for them? Does anyone do that?
A clear shell?
I do like a clear shell.
I'm not sure. it would be fiddly, particularly on the DSs, because with it
It would,
having the
wouldn't
two screens, where the hinge is, there's a ribbon
it?
cable that
Yeah,
literally goes through the hinge and up to the screen. So you'd have to carefully get all of that untangled and through, and you'd risk breaking
yeah.
That's one I would not worry and bother about, but it would look very nice with a transparent case for sure.
You can get them for the Steam Deck, but it's a right faff to do. It's like really difficult. So I'm too scared to do it myself.
You did the right thing. You did one on a Dreamcast, and that one looks fantastic, and it's
It does
not
look fantastic.
insane.
Yeah, it looks fantastic, and it's like half an hour and nothing scary.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And then you're changing the power supply apparently on it to a
I am.
modern
Yeah, I
variant.
bought it. Having been inspired by you doing it. It looks a lot. It looks kind of cool, isn't it? A tiny little small one. So yeah, it's got to be done.
Well, to be honest, I was kind of forced to do it because, first of all, I put a GDMU in it, which means you replace the optical drive, which I've kept because it was actually fine, and put a GDMU. So the problem was, if you ever burned your own discs of Dreamcast games, Dreamcast used a format called GD-ROM, which was basically near enough a gigabyte of data it could store. I think it was actually by Yamaha. And then, if you wanted to burn your own CDs, well, CDs don't go up to a gigabyte. So often, games, if they got over a certain size, they'd trim out content or they'd greatly reduce the quality of the audio. And the thing that always got hit hard was music. You'd either have no music or the music would be heavily, heavily compressed compared to the original version. So GD-ROM, you don't worry about all that. You just get the GD-ROM versions of the ISOs, and it's just like you're playing the original, and it loads really quick. It's great. But I think it's more of a UK Dreamcast thing. Because you've taken out the optical drive, it's not drawing as much power from the power supply, but it's still trying to supply that power somewhere, so it gets very hot. So that's why I got the modern power, which it wasn't expensive. I got that from China. Works absolutely fine. What can you remember the name of it? Come on, you're on a bit of a roll.
Of the power supply.
Yeah. Dream PSU.
I don't remember the name.
Dream PSU.
That's logical.
Yeah. So that has got mixed reviews actually, but I've found the best way of getting that to work reliably is just have a very good power supply.
Dream PSU. You're right.
Yeah, so as long as you've got a good power adapter that's going to supply the right voltage and amps it's looking for, it's absolutely fine. But if you use I used a universal one and it caused interference on the display. Then I used one that was specific of what it wanted, and then it's been absolutely fine. So just something to note, folks. But yeah, GD-ROM, highly recommended. And you certainly the Dream PSU. And the cat wants to contribute as well.
Yep. Cat thinks I'm talking to it.
Okay, so that's the Dreamcast. That's a number of things we've talked about which we've modded. You're getting your BBC Micro sorted out. So which ones in your collection are you wanting to test after that? Because you've been on a bit of a binge as well.
I'll fix the BBC Micro, and then I think that 64C is the next one.
Okay, definitely wait for me to bring my modern PSU then.
And I know I can get a clear shell for that, so I'm thinking of that.
How much was that? £80?
It was quite expensive, yeah. I've forgotten. It was more, slightly more than you'd want it to be, but it would just look so good.
You say that, but it also depends on the condition of the motherboard and the components on it.
Yeah,
I would not want to do that on mine because, again, whoever had it previously, I think had stuck it in a garage somewhere, and anything that's metal is pretty much rusted.
Well, it's not exactly clear, is it? It's like that crystal thing, so it'll blur. So you're not going to be going, oh, that board's a bit.
Oh,
dodgy.
right, okay. It's like something where, it's a bathroom window.
It's a bathroom window. Yeah.
It's clear, but it's not clear.
Yeah, it's not super clear. Yeah, I don't like a super clear one. I've seen some Amigas that are super clear, and like I don't like that. But I like that Dreamcast frosted bathroom window look.
You probably won't like me saying this, but the Dreamcast one looks particularly great because of its LED light the Dreamcast has.
Yeah, you want some little lights underneath it
There
shining
you
through.
go.
You want lights in there.
The next Macs should definitely have RGB lighting. I'll say it now. What would Steve Jobs say about that?
No.
Definitely. Most definitely. So, we definitely have to see each other then and test a few more of your machines. And not forgetting, folks, on pixelrefresh.com, I did tour all of Tony's collection he has there, which he has a fantastic collection of retro gear. Of when, at least when I visited, a lot hadn't been tested recently, and slowly but surely you've been working your way through it. And so far, his success story has been very good, except for the BBC Micro, which you have a resolution for.
Yep, we'll get there with that. We'll get there. I mean, it's a slow job because all these things, it's a chunk of money, isn't it, to get them going again? But it's worth doing.
Definitely. But there is a video you can watch where we actually go around and have a look at everything.
Yeah.
And hopefully in the future we can do ones on individual devices, which would be nice. Particularly some of the rare ones you've got.
That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Would be nice to, because some of the ones you've got I've only heard of in like the last few years. Like the Enterprise, I had no knowledge of the Enterprise until a few years ago. So I'm intrigued to see what you can actually do with the thing, what sort of software was available. And you've already got some doodads available for yours. So that's very nice.
Yeah, I would like to get that up and running. Yeah. I mean, I never, again, I bought it and then didn't do anything with it, but I need to, because the thing about it was the specs were great. I mean, it had really good specs. So it'd be nice to explore exactly what those were and maybe write a bit of Z80 and get some on screen. That would be great.
That would be awesome to see.
It's a way off. I mean, there is no scene. There isn't much. You don't hear. Like Spectrums everywhere and stuff like that. But you don't hear people talking about the Enterprise at all. I mean, it's much smaller than. It's a fraction the size of even CPC. CPC is much smaller than Spectrum, but it's much bigger than the Enterprise. You don't see much for that. So, what you have to do to write software for it, I don't know.
Well, talking of software. And ZX Spectrum next. In fact, there's another Spectrum coming out.
There is,
in the shape of the original ZX Spectrum with the emulation board inside with a number of titles included. So
the Spectrum, the Spectrum.
So if you're a Spectrum nut or haven't had the ability to dabble and don't want to go down the original hardware route because you've heard enough of mine and Tony's stories of problems with capacitors and whatnot, then that's a good option to try the library that's available.
It's a good proposition, I think, because it's not all that expensive. Was it 90 quid or something?
Yeah, exactly that.
A nice menu onto all the classic games, and then you can put your own stuff into it or use it as a test machine or whatever. So I guess you can write BASIC and all sorts of things. So it's a pretty good proposition. As far as I can tell, it's been well received, and they've got like not a billion, but quite a lot of pre-orders. 1 billion would be good, wouldn't it?
1 billion would be fantastic.
That would be quite a new market opening up.
That would certainly worry Xbox and PlayStation if suddenly the Spectrum became the number one console.
It would, wouldn't it? Although it's not a console, James.
I know. I knew you were going to pick up that as soon as I said it.
It's a computer.
It's a computer. One of the very earliest ones with its nice little rubber keys.
Yeah. Anyway, needless to say, I've got one on order. Not that I need it, but I'm quite curious to see how well it works. And I'm starting to think. I mean, we're writing a next game at the moment, Spectrum next game at the moment, but it looks like there'll actually be a market for actual regular Spectrum 1 to 8 games. So I'm kind of thinking in future I might step down even from the next and back to Spectrum 48 world and write another truly classic style Spectrum game. It's looking like it's a viable thing to do. So, yeah,
I don't know. It's me trying to get you to do an Amiga A500 title instead of a 1200, and now you're talking about the ZX Spectrum.
Well, yeah. Well, I wasn't thinking about it until this next thing.
The Spectrum.
The Spectrum jumped onto the scene, and the enthusiasm for it's quite considerable. So, I think it will renew the market for Spectrum, classic Spectrum games. But yeah, we've taken on board your Amiga 500 stuff. So
Look, I've got two, so I must be helping the numbers of working Amigas right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. There need to be machines out there. But I guess the mini 500 thing was pretty positive in that regard. And I think there's more to come on the Amiga. So I think there's more hardware coming along next year. I think you hear rumors of these things. So yeah, Amiga's looking pretty good. Spectrum's looking pretty good. So yeah.
But even though I own two A500s, immediately you can almost guarantee everyone will then follow on and ask me, "Do you have an A1200?"
You really should have one, James.
Not at that price, my friend.
It's a bit odd that you don't have one. Well, what are they, 300 quid? Come on.
And the rest.
Stop buying all the bits of junk and just buy it.
Ooh.
All these little bits you're buying, you could add them all together and you'd have yourself an A1200.
Yeah, but I've got an A500 and that plays probably 90+% of the game library of what was out on the Amiga. And then the ones that don't probably run on my Acorn Archimedes. So it's not got quite... I mean, look, I'm a collector. I'd love one in my collection, but pretty much... I think actually the most expensive retro hardware I've ever purchased was the Acorn Archimedes. And that was only because I had one back in the day, absolutely regretted getting rid of it because it was literally the last Christmas present my dad gave me before he passed away. So I shouldn't have got rid of the original one. So I got it back for nostalgia and out of love for my father, if I'm honest. But that was 225. Which actually, for an Acorn Archimedes, is bloody good. You look on eBay, they go for quite a bit more often. And I just can't go over that figure. So everything else has been either, for example, the Mega CD and a Sega Mega Drive 2. I already had the original Mega Drive Model 1, but I wanted the Model 2 and the Mega CD too. Found it for a good price, and it came with about 12 games. Well, I don't need the games, so I can sell the 12 games and almost cover the cost of the hardware. So I've always got some sort of clever little plan where it all kind of works out. But if I buy an A1200, that's just money gone. And I can play most of the Amiga library now. So as a collector, sure, absolutely, I would love an A1200. I will not lie. But still, it's a big commitment for something I probably wouldn't actually use that much compared to what I've got in the Amiga world already.
I see.
That doesn't mean I don't want one, though.
You do want one? I
do want one, of course I do. But I have to find an absolute bargain for me to suddenly take that plunge. And I only got into the retro computing stuff because we had Reese in a Game and Gadget podcast from Control Alt Reese. I'm not blaming him. It's more of a tribute to him, really. And I saw his Atari computer collection. I thought, it would be nice to have a retro computer. I've got all these retro consoles. I should have a computer. And then I just happened to see an Atari ST, which was going for a good price. And then it kind of spiraled from there.
So you're spending money on Atari STs when you could be putting that towards what you really want, which is an A1200.
I love the Atari ST. It's got its charms. Look, I'll be honest, it's incredibly odd for me that I also have an Amstrad CPC 464, which ironically has the same sound and music chip than the Atari ST has. It's bizarre. Same beeps and bops of which you're used to.
Yeah, that is a surprise, isn't it?
Yeah, 16-bit graphics, but very much 8-bit sound, and not as good as Commodore 64 SID chip. Never mind the Amiga.
Yeah, it's a weakness, isn't it?
It is, but it's also part of the charm in a weird way. But I don't regret getting the ST. It's got a GoTech drive in it now, so I can explore a lot of the library in it and just enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, I'd have to sell my ST. I'd have to sell my A500 to get the A1200. Then I'd miss the A500. I'd have to get another A500, and before you know it, I've ended up with a lot, and I'm in considerable debt. All because I listened to Tony Warriner.
You'd be homeless and on the streets, and your life in ruins.
But I'll be surrounded by
Clutching
retro
the
tech.
A1200.
But it is, as you know, it's quite an expensive endeavour, because not just buying the hardware, it's all the accessories and the cables, and goodness knows how many SCART cables have you now had to buy to plug it in?
Plug the Amiga in.
Well, think of the computers you've got. How
All
many
of them.
cables have you now
Well,
purchased?
this is my point. You see, all these granular little purchases that you go, oh, look, 12 quid for this lead, 15 quid for that lead. You could go none of those and just put it all into one big purchase, like an Amiga A1200. The pinnacle of Amiga gaming.
Okay. If it's a pinnacle of Amiga gaming, how much have you used yours since you got it?
Well, not very much. Because the desk is full of Spectrum Next.
Well, you have got a good excuse because you're actually writing a game for it.
I will be moving on to the Amiga next, so yeah, and that's probably why I'll get an A500 as well, just a cheap one, just to sit and do a final test on, because you can't be actually running the thing on a real bit of hardware. I mean, in theory, the 500 Mini would suffice, and it would. But I always like to have the real target machine.
I'm sure I can borrow you one of mine if needed.
Well, actually, they're not cheap. Actually, if you look,
they're not cheap.
So if you get a good one that's been recapped and stuff, then
they don't really need recapping though. A500s, they're built like a tank. I've been told many times, and I've not had to sort any problems. Oh,
people do though. Yeah.
So this is the one that's got a little bit more problems, as you can tell, but I've cleaned it all up. It's yellowed a bit, but guess how much I paid for this? And amazingly, it fully works.
30 quid.
How the hell did you know that? Yes, 30 quid. Well done. I didn't buy it from Tony, I swear. But yeah, 30 quid. He didn't know if it worked. It'd been, again, stored in a garage. It was disgusting and cruddy, but I've cleaned it all up. And the floppy disk drive works and everything.
That's pretty good.
That is very good.
And it has the extra RAM in it?
No, it didn't come with the extra RAM.
Okay.
I would need to get that separately. But, yeah, 30 quid, you can't really complain, can you? But if there's any device that's screaming out for one of those transparent cases, given how bad this one is, it's probably this Amiga right here.
You can get them.
But guess, now if I bought the transparent case, let's see, and then I'd need the keys to match. That's probably going to come close to an Amiga A1200.
You know what? You can also buy a reproduction box and polys. And that's a nice thing to have, isn't it? You know, all these things.
Well, there's lots of nice things to have in the retro space, trust me.
Yeah, there is a lot of nice things to have.
I'm just grateful I'm not one of these game collectors that has to have every version or every game release in the UK territory or Europe or Japan or whatever it is, where they have 500 games on the shelf. I mean, look, I'm all for it. It looks great. I can see why you do it, but I haven't gone down that avenue, and I didn't for that very reason. I've got no space to put it all.
It's a slippery slope, is that one?
It is, and some of the games go for extraordinary prices.
Well, the Dreamcast is if you're gonna do that, the Dreamcast is where you start because it's got a quantifiable list of games it's not out of reach. You can actually do it, but it's not that many. It's a couple of hundred or something, isn't it? You could embark on that, but I mean, if you wanted every Amiga game, there'd be quite a lot to buy.
That's very true. Although I do need to get one Amiga game, the proper retail copy, and that's probably going to be something like Cannon Fodder. Just to say I've got the original. It'd be nice. That's the one I'm probably anchoring for. For some reason, I like to have one retail game for every system I've got. One, it's nice for testing, just to make sure you're not going insane if something's not quite working right with any of these fancy adapters you get. But it's just nice to have the original casing. Like I've got, I haven't even got a tape deck for my Acorn Electron, but I've got one of the original games because the case is just so fantastic. The box that the game comes in. Just very of the era. So there we go, folks. 1 hour's worth of retro discussions. And Tony would definitely need to get Stu on. Stu Cambridge, he's been doing the artwork for your new game you've been working on together. So it would be nice to have maybe a podcast special to talk to you two about that one and how that's looking and the possible future ports, which may include the Amiga, which may include the Dreamcast, and who knows where else.
Well, that is the plan. Maybe even Mega Drive we're thinking about now.
Oh, and then the PS Vita.
Yeah, that's quite far down the list.
Yeah. Oh, it's only because I'm more fascinated right now with that OLED. Oh, it's beautiful. Anyway, you take care, folks. If you have any questions or comments for the next podcasts, just go to pixelrefresh.com and send us an email. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.